Impact investment firm LeapFrog and Singapore state-owned Temasek are launching a new report today on what they say is a $1.3 trillion opportunity to reshape transport in Asia. Now, the joint release focuses on unlocking the power of affordable EVs, offering a clean mode of transport to millions while reducing emissions. Now, this comes as LeapFrog's chief executive prepares to go to New York Climate Week to speak about the significant investment opportunities as the world transitions to cleaner fuels. Well, I'm very pleased to be joined by Andy Kuper, the chief executive of LeapFrog. Andy, welcome to the program. You're on your way in transit, actually, to New York to talk about Climate Week. I don't know whether there's many more investments than people care to talk about because of political backlash. So do you see the money there, but kind of hidden because people don't want to advertise it?
Well, there is an extraordinary amount of capital that is looking to invest in the transition to electric. It is happening at great speed, and we do as a world need to bring that curve down of emissions. We see amazing companies across Asia and Africa, for example, which contain together over 5 billion of the world's 8 billion people that are delivering, whether it's electric vehicles, rooftop solar, new innovations in food and agriculture, to that huge population growing at extraordinary rate, and they can take a lot of capital. So investors are getting excited about shifting from risk to opportunity, and that's what we're meeting next week in New York to discuss in multiple forums.
So, Andy, where would you deploy capital right now in a smart way?
We see India is tremendously exciting. So we have just released this report with Temasek, but also two companies, Mahindra and Battery Smart, that are serving this $1.3 trillion opportunity around electric mobility. If you think of the millions and millions of vehicles that are being bought every single year in India as people grow in their wealth levels, if they keep going on intensive carbon levels, if they have the usual fossil fuel engines, we're going to blow the world's carbon budget. Whereas electric vehicles are not just now better, they're cheaper. They're 40% cheaper over their life. So there's an opportunity now to roll out cheaper, better and cleaner vehicles to literally billions of people.
But Andy, it's very difficult to find the right one, right? I think in China they have about 100 producers of EVs. A lot of them are viable also because the government is pumping a lot of money into it. In Europe, you have players that haven't quite managed to go, for example, to the level of Tesla. So where, you know, as an investor, is it the components, is it the parts? Like, where do you actually deploy that capital?
Well, you're absolutely right. And obviously what you want is managers and investors who know the market well. Right. I've been working at LeapFrog for almost 20 years, almost 30 years since I lived in India. We really focus on finding those incredible companies, often in the private markets, they're not yet in the public markets, and growing them at scale. So you have to go to the folks who have worked there for a long time. But are there opportunities across the value chain? Absolutely, across every single piece. What we're most excited about is the distribution piece, really that last mile of the billions of emerging consumers, because those people's income is increasing actually vastly faster than the average, albeit off a low base. And as they do that, as women no longer have to go in a car driven by a man or a bus driven by a man, but can take their own electric scooter to work or to school, you see a very dramatic change in the distribution of these kinds of goods, and the companies that deliver that are growing very fast. So that's where we see a great level of excitement.
And you're comfortable that we have the technology, because sometimes, you know, for example, in hydrogen, you have the technology, but then you have better technology in 2-3 years. So is there, Absolutely. You know, some investors say you can't scale too quickly because then your scale, it's like the USB keys, you scale but with the wrong USB key and then you can't fit it.
Yeah, so there are areas where we have not reached the green tipping point, but there are areas where we are far beyond it. Electric mobility is a case in point where we are far beyond it. It's actually 40% cheaper, right? So you're getting something that is cleaner and cheaper. But there are other areas, like areas of food and agriculture or the built environment or solar panels on rooftops, where it is much cheaper than the grid. The old grids can be incredibly inefficient in these markets, whereas new and exciting solar panels can be really efficient and very good for people, and they can actually feed back into the grid. So we are seeing areas where that tipping point has been reached, and we actually call it the green discount. It used to be you had to pay a premium to get your Tesla or whatever it was. Yeah. Now there's actually a green discount if it's approached in the right way. So in those tipping point areas, investors really can deploy trillions, and our report today really reveals that.
And is there enough appetite? Again, so what you're working on is in emerging and impact markets. impact markets had a resurgence maybe 2-3 years ago, and I don't know whether, as returns were in certain places a little bit lower than promised, investors have second thoughts or have slowed down the amount they're putting in.
Sure, there are always markets like Ghana or Sri Lanka that have really struggled, but if you look at some of the major markets, whether it's Kenya, Vietnam, Indonesia, India, in which we invest, the markets are growing very fast. India is now the 4th largest economy in the world, projected to grow at 7-8%. It's bigger than the UK. It's growing vastly faster than the UK. So these markets where you can have the biggest impact on the most people are not necessarily small, uninteresting, or the most challenging. They can be the most exciting big markets. And so you really can achieve what we like to call profit with purpose, where you generate outsized profits and outsized impact. And because you're serving customers well, you're able to do incredibly well as a business and ultimately as an investor.
And I mean, India has been really, over the last 2 years, the biggest hope that the world is seeing. And then you speak to chief executives on the ground, and they say their main concern is red tape, is actually getting approvals because there's so many layers of bureaucracy. Does that hurt or delay some of your investments there?
Well, I've been working in India, as I say, for over 30 years, and there's been a steady improvement in this. The regulatory approvals come quicker, the support for business goes faster, and the local ecosystem gets stronger. The ecosystem for exits, for deal doing, has completely transformed with multiple local and international funds going in. And so if you operate there, as LeapFrog does, and it's our largest market, and our companies, tens of companies, serve over 200 million people in India now. If you operate there, you are in a whole new world of efficiency and opportunity. It's not without its challenges, but by the way, nor is the UK or the US. And so we're seeing a very different contour as to where you should invest in this new world, because these markets are often bigger, faster growing, with more opportunities and rich ecosystems, as well as more efficiency.
So would this mainly be for infrastructure in India? And we hear a lot about these public-private partnerships. We see Microsoft also, coming into some of these markets, really trying to be a catalyst. Does that impact what you're trying to do?
The public-private partnerships are a good opportunity, but I would say to people that the idea that it all has to be enabled by the public domain or the government is not necessarily true. You can have so many companies that just in their own right, are very exciting opportunities. And so what we're seeing is a real change in how people go about it. Some of the biggest investors in the world are arriving in India in force to seize the market opportunity. And they're going in with the usual expectations about risk and return, and not depending on the government to do that. Climate is a great example where there are so many businesses seizing this opportunity. It's not necessarily only in infrastructure. So we talk a lot in climate about decarbonizing the rich and Western countries. We talk a lot about infrastructure in the global South, but we don't talk enough about those 5 billion emerging consumers and how you serve them and the companies that serve them. And so I hope this can be a big topic of conversation next week in New York. And LeapFrog alone has reached, through our companies, 588 million people. So the idea that this is not a scaled opportunity, the idea that you can't make a lot of money while doing a lot of good, is a very old and poor idea. And I think profit with purpose has really been proven in these markets in recent years and by determined players.
Andy, thanks so much for joining us. Andy Kuper, their founder and chief executive of LeapFrog Investments.